Thank you very much. Madame Bussière, I'd like to ask you about C-9's approach to hate symbols. Now, you would agree that under the current law, someone who displays a hate symbol, and I'm using broadly the definition, let's say, that C-9 uses, could be charged under Section 319 right now, correct?
Effectivement, il y a différentes dispositions du Code criminel qui peuvent être utilisées.
Yes, various provisions of the criminal code could be used when symbols are used. All will depend on the context. One of our questions concerning the provision is to look whether we are already repeating something that already exists in the criminal code.
Believe that as worded now, Bill C-9 would make the display of a symbol on its own a criminal offense, or do you believe that it is just part of the context that could lead to a hate charge?
C'est intéressant parce qu'il y a une tension par rapport à ça dans la manière.
It's interesting. The way we read the text may be different from the way the minister has presented it. He said it's not complete prohibition of any display of a symbol. But when we read the text, it's not very clear. We seem to associate the fact that there's a desire to incite hatred and the fact of displaying a terrorist or a symbol of terrorism or hatred. But there are already criminal consequences if symbols of terrorism are displayed or symbols of hate, but all will depend on the context.
You shared that, Madame Bussière, because this is us with the hate definition, another example then of where the minister's description of the law actually differs from the law itself.
Bien, il y a certainement une tension. Après ça, à partir du moment où...
There is some tension, but the courts will have to interpret it and they will refer to the text, to the context, to the objective of the legislation and the intention of the legislator, what was said and what was presented. So I cannot give you a final answer to the question, but when you read the text, it raises some questions.
Professor Pardee, I'd like to return to you on this. Are you aware that the Ontario Human Rights Commission views misgendering someone, identifying them as the wrong gender, to be discrimination and to be against the law of the Ontario Human Rights Code?
Yes.
So when we saw Bill C-16 in a previous parliament, this was the bill that led Jordan Peterson to speak out so vocally on this. This was expanding Canadian human rights law to include gender identity and effectively embedding in Canadian human rights law the very similar provisions that we have in various provincial human rights codes, correct?
Correct.
So I realize the Canadian Human Rights Act does not itself tie to the criminal code, but it does give a sense of where the government wants to go with this, especially looking at Bill C-63, the Online Harms Act from the previous parliament. And do you see misgendering as being something that could attract a hate charge, the way that this government has viewed hate and the way that C-9 is worded?
Certainly. Potentially. Sure. There's no reason to think not.
And that is, to go back to the UK case, precisely what a lot of people are finding themselves receiving the knock on the door from a British constable over. It's them tweeting something that has waged into gender. Now, again, I do not take, in the purpose of our discussion on C-9, the view that this committee needs to weigh in on this, but it is a live issue that people should be able to freely debate. So when the state is deciding what constitutes hate, my question is, what are the implications on limiting the ability to hash out controversial subjects in society?
Well, they could be devastating. Yes. So there's a back when C-16 was being debated, I was a witness at one of the Senate committee meetings, and one of the senators in that meeting said to me, "Well, look, I'm a free speech guy, but this requiring people to use proper pronouns is just reasonable speech. It's reasonable speech, and therefore it's reasonable legislation." And that completely misconceives the whole idea. The job of the government is not to legislate reasonable speech. If you had a statute that said Canadians will be required to say hello and please and thank you, because that's reasonable speech, that is totalitarian. Because speech is something that people decide for themselves. And so as long as the government thinks that its role is to make sure that people are speaking reasonably, then you're totally off on the wrong track. People's speech is their own unless, for my money, unless they are threatening violence. And if you're over that threshold, you're going to get into the potential for the kinds of problems that you are alluding to. And that potential is very, very real.
Okay. Well, appropriately, thank you.